Okay, the subject of this brief audio clip is a bit of history about the so-called postmodernist account of truth. And again, like I said in class, the term postmodernism is so broad, I wouldn't want to say that what I'm describing here describes all postmodernists. That's just not true. But some subset of those individuals who call themselves postmodernists would hold the view that I describe towards the end. So what is this view? In class I described this in terms of a historical development, which basically has three stages. The first stage being the Marxist stage, where Karl Marx and subsequent Marxists, neo-Marxists who believed that Marx was right, maintained the following view. They argued that the history of human social arrangements, human history, is subject to laws that govern the development of those societies, of those relationships, in the same way that, say, physical bodies moving through space are governed by laws of physics. So just as you can explain and predict the position and future position of, say, the moon using laws of nature, laws of gravity, laws of motion, and so forth, you can do the same with human history if you were to locate and understand the laws that are actually governing that particular development in the world, that part of the world, human history. And Marx and his followers thought that they had done that. They had discovered the mechanisms that cause history to unfold the way that it does. So not only could they look back in history and explain why things happened the way they did, they could look forward and predict where things are going because they understood the laws that were driving the mechanism. Okay, they have a prediction about how things will go. Well, an obvious question would be, all right, after you've made this prediction, how did things actually go? Were your predictions accurate? Did history unfold in the way that Marx and the Marxists predicted that it would? And the answer to that was no. What people observed in the world did not match the theory's predictions. Now, what to do about that? One thing to do would be to say that, well, Marx is just wrong about everything, that the whole program has been refuted by reality, basically. But not everyone did that. There are some individuals who thought that, well, Marx is generally right about where things are going and what things will be like when we get there, that this socialist sort of communist kind of a social arrangement, that's where things are going and where they should be. But they haven't. Things didn't go the way Marx predicted because there's this other element that Marx missed. And here's where the second stage comes in, the so-called Frankfurt School. These are a group of philosophers and sociologists who thought that, well, look, in the places that Marx predicted, we would find a revolution taking place in well-developed capitalist countries, because that's the last, capitalism is the last phase before the final revolution. That wasn't happening. The people in those countries seemed to be relatively content. They certainly weren't about to, engage in revolutions. They seemed to be, getting along because they had a standard of living that, by comparison with the rest of the world, was, looking pretty good, because they had all these, consumer goods, a car, a house, a TV. They could go to restaurants here and there. They were going to movies, so they had fairly comfortable lives, and they just had no interest in engaging in an overthrow of the system that produced that. So the question became for the Frankfurt School, well, why do they think that? They should recognize that there's injustice all around them and that there's the haves and the have-nots. Why do they think that things are okay? And they came up with the idea that, well, wait a minute, it's all these cultural institutions and features that are sort of massaging their brains into thinking that everything's okay. Basically, they're being brainwashed. I don't mean to make that sound like there's some committee of brainwashers somewhere sitting in a room coming up with plans to brainwash people. But this can happen unintentionally. And what do we mean by this cultural sort of massaging? And they meant that everything that comprises culture. In particular, they emphasized advertisements, ads that you find in magazines and on television and newspapers, because ads are supposed to, they're designed to get you to want something, to identify yourself with some product, right? Ranging and what product? All of them, anything that's being advertised. So advertising, especially visual, anything visual like advertising, movies, television, and now for us the internet and social media, all of those things have a tendency to influence us in ways to get us to want to be a certain person, to want certain things, to have as a goal the sorts of things that are put on the menu for us by those sources. And this, of course, includes other things too. They thought it was comprehensive down to the language that we use, the clothing, architecture, fashion, all that, video games, literature, just about everything that comprises a given culture, especially a well-developed modern one. That was the source of what people believed to be desirable, what they thought of themselves as, and also what they believed to be true. So basically, the Frankfurt School decided that, well, culture has to be manipulated to get people to see that actually things aren't great. So they weren't, the Frankfurt School, they weren't relativists about truth so much. They really thought that things ought to be different, and they had definitive ideas about how things ought to be. They just thought that the mechanism by which people couldn't see what they should see is because of all these cultural influences. Now, the third stage occurs when some people read the Frankfurt School and said, "You're right. That is what's going on. What we believe to be true, what we desire, what the goals that we have, how we view ourselves, how we identify ourselves, is a function of these cultural influences." But they said, that's all there is. There isn't some underlying set of laws like Marx claimed, or nothing like that. There is no state of affairs of communism or socialism which we're all headed to, nothing like that. In fact, they claimed it's not just a recent development, the cultural sort of influence is not just a recent development. That's pretty much what human beings are like anyway. We believe things based off cues, based on our social surroundings, whether the culture is really well developed or not. This third stage constitutes the so-called postmodern turn, where they redefine the notion of truth as simply whatever is produced by the confluence of all these cultural influences on our minds. So what we believe to be true is simply a function of all of those things coming together, massaging our minds into believing X, Y, and Z. We may do this individually or collectively, but nonetheless, that's how what we believe to be true is formed. And they went further to say that, well, all these cultural institutions are a function of who's in charge, because advertisements aren't made by anybody. Movies aren't made just by anybody. They're made by certain people, and the people who make them have certain kinds of ideas about what kind of ideas they want to project. And if they are adept at it, they can get a lot of people to go along with them. And it's not as though they're being nefarious and saying, "Watch me dupe everybody." No, it's just that, like the Frankfurt School said, you don't really need necessarily a conspiracy, although you could explain it that way, but you don't need that. All you need is the descriptive fact that this is how people come to believe things that are true. So when we when we get online and read a magazine that says scientists say that discovered that X, people who read it walk away believing it. Why? Because in our culture, scientists hold a special place, a privileged place of delivering to us truths. Most people don't even know how those truths were produced. They have no idea of how the studies are conducted or understand the science behind it at all, but they walk away believing it. And the same would be true of all sorts of other things that they come to believe by just looking at advertising or things like that. So the upshot here is that the postmodernists claim that, well, look, the old common sense view of truth as having a true belief means it corresponds with reality is sort of quaint and outmoded and just simply false. That is not what true beliefs are for human beings. What we call truth is just a function of being massaged by all these symbols and signs that collectively produce our worldview. That, in a nutshell, is how postmodernism, at least this little sliver of postmodernism about truth, came about.